What if the reason your next chapter keeps getting delayed is not because you lack discipline, talent, or opportunity, but because you keep exposing it before it has the strength to survive other people's opinions? Every time you announce a plan too early, you invite advice you never asked for, doubt you never had, and expectations that quietly pull your attention away from the work itself. Some things grow better in darkness. Some decisions become stronger when nobody is watching. And some of the greatest changes in your life will begin the moment you stop explaining what you are about to do. You do not need applause before the result. You do not need permission before the transformation. You do not need to tell anyone what you are building. This time, let your silence protect the work, and let the finished life speak for you. Written and published by Audiobook Horizon. Chapter 1. The life you keep announcing is the life you delay. There is a quiet difference between intention and identity. Intention says, I am going to change. Identity says nothing. Identity begins acting. Most people do not fail because they lack goals. They fail because they spend too much emotional energy talking about goals before those goals have developed roots. A new plan is fragile. In the beginning, it is not strong enough to survive every opinion, every question, every warning, every joke, every comparison, and every piece of advice that other people feel entitled to give. You have probably experienced this without realizing what was happening. You decide that you are going to start something. Maybe you want to change careers after years in the same field. Maybe you want to begin exercising again after a long period of neglect. Maybe you want to write, study, save money, build a side business, reduce your expenses, leave a draining environment, learn a new skill, or simply become a different version of yourself. The idea gives you energy. Then you tell people. One person says it sounds difficult. Another tells you about someone who tried and failed. Someone else tells you what they would do if they were you, even though they are not you and have never done what you are trying to do. A friend laughs. A relative becomes suspicious. A co-worker asks too many questions. Someone reminds you of your age. Someone reminds you of your past. Someone reminds you of an old failure, as if your history is a legal contract requiring you to repeat it forever. By the time the conversation is over, your original energy has changed. The goal is still yours, but now it is crowded with other people's voices. That is why silence can be practical. Silence is not secrecy for the sake of drama. It is not about pretending you are mysterious. It is not about punishing people by withholding information. It is about understanding that some parts of your life grow better without constant exposure. Think of how many things are strongest while they are being formed away from public attention. A foundation is built before a house becomes impressive. Roots spread below the ground before a tree offers shade. Muscles strengthen through repeated effort, long before anyone notices the difference. Savings accumulate one quiet decision at a time. A new skill is developed through awkward practice before it looks natural. Confidence often grows during periods when nobody is applauding. The problem with announcing too early is that it can create a false sense of progress. You receive some of the emotional reward before doing the work. You say, I am going to get in shape, and someone tells you that is great. You say, I am starting a business, and people ask what you will call it. You say, I am changing my life, and suddenly you feel like the main character of a story that has not actually happened yet. The words become a small substitute for action, and action is less exciting. Action is waking up and doing the boring thing again. Action is making the call. Action is opening the document. Action is studying when nobody cares. Action is saying no to an expense that would be easier to justify than to avoid. Action is going for the walk when the weather is inconvenient. Action is practicing when you still sound like a beginner. Action is being patient when your effort has produced no visible evidence. That part rarely gets applause. And that is exactly why it changes you. The most dangerous habit is not speaking about your goals once. It is building an identity around being someone who is always about to do something. You know the type, because almost everyone has been that person at some point. Next month, they will start. After the holidays, they will focus. Once work gets easier, they will exercise. Once the children are older, they will take care of themselves. Once they have more money, they will learn to manage money. Once they feel confident, they will begin. Once they are ready, they will act. Years can disappear inside the word once. A quiet life forces you to confront a harder question. What are you doing when there is nobody to impress with your intention? That question is uncomfortable because it removes the performance. If you cannot talk about the plan, you have only two choices. You can work on it or admit that you are not working on it. There is freedom in that honesty. You do not need to become silent about everything. That would be foolish. Some goals require support, professional guidance, partnership, accountability, or coordination. If you are making a financial decision that affects your spouse, silence is not maturity. If you need medical, legal, or professional advice, privacy should not become isolation. If you are building something with a team, communication is part of the work. But there is a difference between necessary communication and unnecessary announcement. Necessary communication moves the project forward. Unnecessary announcement often moves attention toward the project without moving the project itself. Learn the difference. Before you tell someone what you are planning, ask yourself a simple question. Does this person need to know in order for me to make progress? If the answer is no, perhaps the plan can remain yours for a little longer. This matters even more as you get older. When you are younger, you often believe that everyone needs to understand your choices. You explain why you are changing. You defend why you want something different. You want approval from family, friends, co-workers, even people whose lives you would never choose for yourself. But maturity should eventually teach you that understanding is not permission. Other people do not have to understand your next chapter for you to begin writing it. They do not need to approve of your new routine. They do not need to agree with your priorities. They do not need to see the value of your goal before you see the value of it. They do not need to believe in your ability before you practice your ability. The older you become, the more expensive unnecessary explanation becomes. Not because time is running out in some dramatic way, but because your attention becomes more valuable. You have already spent years learning what drains you, what distracts you, what matters, what does not matter, what kind of people encourage growth, and what kind of people quietly resist it. At some point, repeating the same mistake is no longer innocence. It is a decision. If every time you announce a goal, you become distracted, discouraged, overconfident, or overly concerned with how people react, then stop announcing the goal. Keep it small. Keep it close. Protect the first few weeks. Let the routine become more real than the conversation. There is another reason to work quietly. It changes your relationship with praise. When nobody knows what you are doing, praise cannot be your fuel. You have to find a deeper source. You have to become someone who can keep a promise without being watched. That is one of the most useful forms of confidence a person can build. Public confidence is easy to misunderstand. It can look like speaking loudly, appearing certain, sharing big goals, or presenting yourself as someone with a clear plan. Private confidence is different. Private confidence is knowing that when you tell yourself you will do something, your words mean something to you. That trust is built slowly. Every morning, you wake up and do what you said you would do. You make a deposit into that trust. Every time you abandon a commitment for a weak reason, you make a withdrawal. This does not mean you must be perfect. Perfection is not discipline. Perfection is often another excuse to quit. You will miss days, you will make mistakes, you will have weeks when your energy drops. You will change your strategy. You may discover that a goal no longer fits your life. The question is not whether you perform perfectly. The question is whether you return. People who build quietly develop the ability to return without needing a dramatic restart. They do not need to announce a new beginning every Monday. They simply begin again. There is dignity in that. Imagine living for the next 6 months without making any unnecessary announcements about what you intend to change. You still communicate where needed. You still ask for help where appropriate. But you stop turning every private decision into public discussion. You decide. You act. You adjust. You continue. 6 months later, something interesting happens. You no longer need to explain what you are doing, because parts of your life have started to explain themselves. You are stronger. Your finances are more organized. Your skill is sharper. Your mind is calmer. Your home is more ordered. Your boundaries are clearer. Your work is better. Your attention is less scattered. The result may not be dramatic, but it is real. And real progress carries a kind of authority that intention never can. You do not need to tell everyone what you are building. Build enough that you no longer need the announcement. Chapter 2. Privacy is not hiding, it is protection. Many people confuse privacy with fear. They assume that if you do not talk about your plans, relationships, finances, routines, ambitions, or personal changes, you must be hiding something. That idea is immature. Privacy is not the absence of confidence. Often, it is evidence of confidence. A person who needs constant validation must constantly provide information. They need people to know what they are doing, because they need people to react to what they are doing. Their choices feel more real when somebody else has witnessed them. A person who has become more internally grounded can make decisions without immediately seeking an audience. This does not mean they become secretive, cold, or distant. It means they become selective. Selectivity is one of the skills that adulthood is supposed to teach. Not everyone deserves access to every part of your life. That statement sounds obvious until you look at how many people live in the opposite way. They discuss private financial decisions with casual acquaintances. They explain relationship problems to co-workers. They share unfinished plans with people who have a history of criticism. They post emotional reactions while those emotions are still fresh. They reveal goals before they have made even one serious commitment to them. Then they wonder why their minds feel crowded. Every piece of information you share can create a new line of influence. Someone now has an opinion. Someone has a question. Someone has advice. Someone makes an assumption. Someone repeats the information to another person. Someone compares. Someone becomes jealous. Someone becomes worried. Someone tries to help in a way you did not ask for. Someone uses your uncertainty as evidence that you should stop. The more unfinished a plan is, the more vulnerable it can be to outside pressure. Privacy reduces the number of voices in the room, and sometimes that is exactly what you need. There is an important difference between protecting a goal and hiding from accountability. If you have a problem with compulsive spending, it may help to tell someone trustworthy. If you are trying to overcome an addiction, isolation can be dangerous. If you are making a major decision involving shared responsibilities, you should communicate with the people affected. Privacy should never become a clever excuse to avoid truth. But when a goal is yours to carry, and when other people do not need the information, you are allowed to keep it private. You do not owe everyone a progress report. You do not owe people an explanation for every change in your behavior. You do not owe casual observers access to your timeline. You do not owe anyone details just because they asked. That last sentence is especially important. A question is not an entitlement. Someone can ask, "How much are you earning now?" You can answer generally or not at all. Someone can ask, "Why are you not coming around as much?" You can say, "I have been focusing on a few things." Someone can ask, "Are you planning to leave your job?" You can say, "I will share if there is something worth sharing." Someone can ask, "What are you working on?" You can say, "Something important to me." You are not required to lie. You are not required to be rude. You are also not required to open every door because someone knocked. A mature boundary often sounds boring. That is part of its strength. You do not need dramatic speeches about protecting your energy. You do not need to announce that you are cutting people off. You do not need to post statements about becoming private. That would defeat the point. You simply share less. You explain less. You respond with less emotional urgency. You become more deliberate about who receives access to unfinished parts of your life. Consider how often people sabotage their own goals by exposing them too early to environments that do not support them. You decide to eat differently, and suddenly every meal becomes a debate. You decide to spend less, and people tease you for being too careful. You decide to return to school, and someone reminds you that you are older than the typical student. You decide to build a business, and someone asks why you would risk stability. You decide to change careers, and everyone wants to know whether you are certain. You decide to leave a social circle that drains you, and people demand an explanation. You decide to become quieter, and people ask whether something is wrong. Sometimes nothing is wrong. Sometimes you have simply become more protective of your direction. The world is full of people who confuse access with closeness. They think because they have known you for years, they should know everything about you now. But history does not automatically grant permanent access. You can love someone and still keep parts of your life private. You can respect someone and still decide that they are not the right person to discuss a particular goal with. You can be kind without being transparent about everything. You can be connected without being exposed. This becomes especially important after 40 because life becomes more complex. You may have children, aging parents, financial responsibilities, professional pressures, old friendships, a marriage, a divorce, health priorities, a changing sense of identity, and goals that no longer resemble what you wanted at 25. At this stage, not every decision needs group approval. In fact, too much consultation can become avoidance. You ask 5 people what they think because you do not want to take responsibility for choosing. Then their opinions conflict, which gives you another reason to delay. Eventually, you must make decisions that belong to you. That is where privacy becomes powerful. It creates a protected space where you can hear your own reasoning. When nobody is asking for updates, you can evaluate the plan honestly. Do I still want this? Is this working? What needs to change? Am I doing this because it matters to me, or because I wanted people to be impressed? Would I continue if nobody ever congratulated me? Those questions are easier to answer when the audience disappears. There is another kind of protection that privacy offers: protection from your own ego. When people know what you are doing, you may start performing the goal instead of pursuing the goal. You begin thinking about how progress looks. You choose what is impressive rather than what is effective. You exaggerate, you rush, you take unnecessary risks to produce visible results faster. You avoid admitting that something is not working because you do not want to look inconsistent. Privacy gives you permission to change your mind quietly. That matters. A private plan can evolve. You can test ideas. You can fail. You can learn. You can make adjustments without feeling as though every change needs to be explained. When you work quietly, failure becomes information instead of embarrassment. You tried a method. It did not work. You changed the method. No performance required. This is how experienced people often make better decisions than inexperienced people. They are less interested in looking certain and more interested in becoming accurate. You do not need to prove that your first idea was correct. You need to build something that works. Your life is not a press conference. You do not need a statement for every decision. You do not need to publish your reasons. You do not need to defend your schedule to people who are not living it. You do not need to explain your priorities to people who benefit from you having weak priorities. Some people will prefer the old version of you because the old version was more available, more predictable, easier to influence, more willing to say yes, and more likely to share everything. Your privacy may feel like distance to them. That does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes distance is simply the shape of a new boundary. Protect what is still becoming. You can open the door later. But not every seed needs to be dug up every morning to prove that it is growing. Chapter 3. Stop asking people to approve a life they do not have to live. Approval can be addictive because it disguises itself as wisdom. You tell yourself that you are simply asking for feedback. Sometimes you are. Other times, you are asking someone else to remove the discomfort of making your own decision. There is nothing wrong with seeking advice from people who are qualified, experienced, trustworthy, and relevant to the decision. Good advice can save years of mistakes. But most people do not seek advice that carefully. They seek opinions. Those are not the same thing. Advice has context. Opinion has reaction. Advice often comes from experience. Opinion can come from habit, fear, preference, jealousy, projection, or misunderstanding. If you want to start a business, the opinion of someone who has never run one should not carry the same weight as the guidance of someone who has built one responsibly. If you want to improve your health, random opinions should not replace qualified medical advice. If you want to manage money better, the loudest person in the room may not be the person whose financial life you would want to copy. If you want to make a major change, the people most emotionally attached to the current version of you may not be the most objective judges of your future. This is not because they are bad people. Sometimes people discourage you because they love you. They fear risk. They fear disappointment. They fear seeing you struggle. They remember your old patterns. They may be trying to protect you from pain, but protection can become limitation when it is based on someone else's tolerance for uncertainty. You have to distinguish between a warning that contains useful information and a warning that contains someone else's fear. That requires maturity. It also requires responsibility. The point is not to ignore everyone and do whatever you want. That is not independence. That is impulsiveness. The point is to stop treating every opinion as equal. When you are younger, approval can feel like permission. You want your parents to approve, your friends to approve, your colleagues to understand, your partner to support every detail, your social circle to validate your direction. But eventually, there are decisions where no amount of outside approval will make the choice easier. You still have to live with it. Imagine you stay in a job you dislike because everyone says it is secure. Those people do not wake up on Monday morning and go to that job for you. Imagine you remain in a city that no longer fits you because people tell you moving is risky. They do not live inside your daily experience. Imagine you continue spending money to maintain an image because your social group expects a certain lifestyle. They do not carry the stress of your bank balance. Imagine you avoid learning something new because someone says you are too old. They will not live with the regret if you never try. Imagine you spend 10 more years waiting for people to understand why your goal matters. Whose life did you protect? Theirs or yours? This does not mean relationships do not matter. They do. Mature adults consider the consequences of their decisions. If you are married, your choices can affect your spouse. If you have children, your risks can affect them. If you have debts, responsibilities, contracts, or commitments, you cannot behave as if only your feelings matter. But responsibility is different from approval. You can take people seriously without surrendering your agency. You can listen carefully and still decide differently. One of the signs of maturity is the ability to hear disagreement without experiencing it as an attack. Someone can say, "I do not think this is a good idea." You can ask why. You can consider the reasoning. You can keep what is useful. You can reject what is not. And you can move forward without spending 3 weeks trying to convince them. Convincing people is exhausting. It is also often unnecessary. If your plan is legitimate, thoughtful, and responsible, reality will eventually provide evidence. You do not have to win every argument before you begin. This is one of the reasons silence is powerful. It reduces the number of arguments you create around things that have not happened yet. Suppose you decide that over the next year you are going to reduce your expenses, learn a marketable skill, build a small second income, improve your health, and prepare for a career shift. If you announce all of that, people may react to the whole imagined future. They may question whether the new career will work. They may ask how much money you think you can earn. They may debate whether the skill is valuable. They may tell you the economy is difficult. They may remind you that competition is high. They may ask why you are doing this at your age. Now you are mentally defending a life that does not exist yet. What if instead you quietly cut expenses? Then you quietly study. Then you quietly test the skill. Then you earn your first small amount. Then you improve. Then you build evidence. Now, 6 or 12 months later, you are no longer asking whether the plan is theoretically possible. You have data. That is the difference between approval and proof. Approval is emotional. Proof is practical. It is easier to trust yourself when you have created evidence through action. This is why your first goal should not be to feel confident. Your first goal should be to create evidence. If you want confidence in your ability to exercise consistently, complete 10 workouts. If you want confidence in your ability to save the first amount. If you want confidence in your ability to write, finish 10 pages. If you want confidence in your ability to learn, complete the first course module. If you want confidence in your ability to build something, serve the first customer. Confidence often follows evidence, and evidence is produced quietly. The need for approval also keeps people emotionally young. A grown person can become trapped in the habit of explaining every choice as though an invisible committee must sign off on their life. Why are you eating differently? Why are you saving? Why are you staying home? Why did you stop going out as often? Why did you change your routine? Why are you studying that? Why do you want to move? Why are you spending time alone? Why are you working on weekends? Why are you saying no? Sometimes the answer is simply, because this is what I have chosen. You do not have to make every answer dramatic. You do not have to produce a courtroom defense. The strongest boundaries are often calm. I am focusing on something important. I have different priorities right now. That no longer works for me. I am keeping that private for now. I appreciate your concern. I have thought about it. These sentences are powerful because they do not invite endless negotiation. You are not trying to defeat the other person. You are ending the need to defend yourself. There will be people who dislike this change. Be prepared for that. When you stop asking for approval, some people lose influence. They may accuse you of changing. They are correct. You are changing. Change is not automatically betrayal. Sometimes it is overdue. The goal is not to become hard, arrogant, or dismissive. The goal is to become responsible for your own direction. Listen well. Think carefully. Seek qualified guidance. Consider consequences. Then decide. And once you decide, stop carrying the imaginary responsibility of making everyone comfortable with your decision. They do not have to live your next chapter. You do. Chapter 4. Your energy is leaking through explanation. There are conversations that leave you tired, even though nothing physical happened. You sat in a chair. You spoke for 20 minutes. And somehow you feel as though you carried furniture up 3 flights of stairs. That is the cost of over-explanation. You explain why you changed your mind. You explain why you need more time. You explain why you are saying no. You explain why you do not want to attend. You explain why you are focusing on your health. You explain why you are saving money. You explain why you want something different. Then, because the person does not immediately understand, you explain again. You add context. You offer examples. You soften your position. You justify your history. You anticipate objections. You answer questions they have not asked. You try to prove that your decision is reasonable. By the end, your boundary has become a presentation. This is one of the most common ways people waste mental energy. The problem is not communication. Good communication is important. The problem is believing that a decision becomes valid only after another person understands it. That belief turns every disagreement into a problem you must solve. But not every misunderstanding requires correction. That sentence can save you years. Some people will misunderstand you because they do not have enough information. Some will misunderstand you because their values are different. Some will misunderstand you because they benefit from misunderstanding you. Some will misunderstand you because accepting your reason would require them to respect a boundary they do not like. Some will misunderstand you because they have already decided what kind of person you are. You cannot solve all of that through better wording. You can spend hours explaining a boundary to someone who is not confused at all. They understand exactly what you are saying. They simply do not like the answer. That distinction matters. If someone repeatedly asks why, after you have already given a clear reason, the issue may not be comprehension. The issue may be resistance. You are allowed to stop explaining. This is particularly important when you are building a new life, because new priorities often disappoint old expectations. Perhaps you used to be available every time someone called. Now you are not. Perhaps you used to spend money casually. Now you do not. Perhaps you used to attend every event. Now you are selective. Perhaps you used to tolerate certain comments. Now you respond differently. Perhaps you used to share every detail. Now you keep more to yourself. People who were comfortable with the old version of you may ask for explanations. You can give one. You do not have to give 20. Every hour spent defending a decision is an hour not spent living it. Every emotional argument about why you need to focus is attention taken away from the thing you are trying to focus on. The irony is almost perfect. You tell people you need to protect your time, then spend an hour explaining why. You tell people you want less drama, then enter a 3-day conversation about why you want less drama. You tell people you are focusing on your future, then spend the evening answering messages about your future. At some point, the behavior must match the boundary. This is where silence becomes useful. Not passive-aggressive silence. Not punishment. Not disappearing to make people anxious. Simple completion. You have said what needed to be said. Now you stop adding. This may feel uncomfortable if you have spent years managing other people's reactions. Many people become over-explainers because they learned early that disagreement was dangerous. They learned to make their reasons perfect so nobody would become upset. They learned to anticipate disappointment. They learned to justify needs before expressing them. They learned that a simple no would create conflict, so they built entire speeches around it. Those habits can survive long after the environment that created them has changed. Now you may be 40, 50, 60 or older, still explaining yourself as though you are asking permission. You are not. A mature life requires emotional economy. Emotional economy means you stop spending 20 units of energy where 2 would be enough. A clear answer is often enough. I cannot do that. I have other plans. I am not discussing that yet. I have decided to focus on something else. That does not work for me. I appreciate the invitation, but I will pass. You do not need to add a paragraph to make the sentence morally acceptable. You may think people will see you as rude. Some will. That does not mean you are rude. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may experience your boundaries as selfishness. People who were used to unlimited access may experience normal privacy as distance. People who were used to immediate responses may experience a reasonable delay as rejection. Their interpretation is information, not a verdict. Of course, you should examine yourself honestly. Sometimes people become so fascinated with boundaries that they use the word to avoid empathy, responsibility, or basic courtesy. That is not the goal. The goal is not to become emotionally unavailable. The goal is to stop leaking energy through unnecessary explanation. There is a useful test. Ask, have I communicated the important information clearly and respectfully? If yes, you may be done. The other person's emotional processing belongs to them. You can care without taking over. This matters enormously when you are rebuilding your life. Rebuilding requires concentration. Concentration requires fewer open loops. Every unresolved conversation is an open loop. Every argument you keep replaying is an open loop. Every person you are trying to convince is an open loop. Every explanation you are refining in your head is an open loop. Close some of them. Let people think what they think. Let them be confused for a while. Let them assume you are changing. Let them wonder what you are doing. Let them notice that you are not as available. You do not need to rush in and correct the story. Your life is not a customer service department for other people's interpretations. There is something powerful that happens when you stop explaining every move. You begin hearing yourself more clearly. Your energy returns. You notice how much mental space was being consumed by imagined conversations. You stop preparing defenses. You stop rehearsing what you will say if someone questions you. You stop measuring your choices against reactions that have not even happened, and that energy can go somewhere useful. Into your health, into your work, into your savings, into your relationships with people who respect your boundaries, into learning, into rest, into planning, into execution. Over-explanation is rarely discussed as a form of distraction, but that is exactly what it can become. It makes you feel active while keeping you away from the difficult simplicity of doing the work. You do not need one more perfect explanation. You may need one quiet hour with your phone somewhere else, and your attention on the thing you said mattered. That is how the new chapter is built. Not through better speeches, through fewer speeches and better decisions. Chapter 5. Build evidence before you build an image. Many people want to look transformed before they have done the work required to become transformed. They want the language of discipline before the habit of discipline. They want the identity of a business owner before the business has customers. They want the image of health before the routine is stable. They want the reputation of being focused before they have learned to protect an afternoon. They want to be seen as someone who is changing. This is understandable. Identity is powerful, but image is dangerous when it grows faster than evidence. The more invested you become in looking like a certain kind of person, the harder it becomes to honestly examine whether you are actually becoming that person. Suppose you announce that you are writing a book. People begin asking about it. Now you are the person writing a book. That identity feels good. But 6 months later, if you have written only 12 pages, the image has become larger than the evidence. Instead of solving the actual problem, which is sitting down and writing, you may begin protecting the image. You talk about research. You discuss your process. You explain that you are busy. You describe the concept. You buy tools. You organize notes. You tell people you are still working on it. All of this can happen without meaningful progress. The same pattern appears everywhere. Someone becomes the person who is getting fit because they bought equipment and talked about a routine. Someone becomes the person who is starting a business because they chose a name and made a logo. Someone becomes the person who is changing careers because they discuss the industry every week. Someone becomes the person who is financially disciplined because they read about investing while continuing to overspend. The image can become a substitute for evidence. Silence interrupts that pattern. If nobody knows, you cannot rely on the identity they reflect back to you. You have to earn the identity privately. You become a writer by writing. You become disciplined by doing what you said. You become financially responsible by making responsible financial decisions. You become focused by protecting attention. You become stronger by training. You become skilled by practicing. You become reliable by following through. The evidence comes first. This order matters because evidence creates a more stable identity. An identity based on praise disappears when praise disappears. An identity based on evidence stays with you. You know what you have done. You do not need anyone to confirm it. This is one of the best reasons to build quietly after 40. By this stage of life, you have probably seen enough performance to recognize it. You have seen people talk more than they act. You may have done it yourself. You have seen impressive beginnings disappear. You have seen plans announced with enthusiasm and abandoned without explanation. You have seen people reinvent themselves publicly every few months. You have seen motivation rise and fall. At some point, the novelty wears off. You start wanting something more solid. You want proof. Not proof for other people. Proof for yourself. Can you trust your own word? Can you choose a direction and continue when nobody is interested? Can you become consistent without excitement? Can you protect a goal after the first emotional rush is gone? Can you keep working when the result is invisible? Those questions reveal more about your future than the size of your ambition. A small goal completed will build more self-trust than a large goal repeatedly announced. This is why it is useful to reduce the size of your promises and increase the frequency of your proof. Instead of telling yourself, "I will transform my entire life this year," decide what you will do this week. Instead of promising that you will get into the best shape of your life, establish a repeatable schedule. Instead of saying you will save a huge amount, automate the first contribution. Instead of saying you will build a major business, test one useful offer. Instead of saying you will read 50 books, finish the one on your table. Instead of saying you will become calm, practice one pause before responding. Evidence is specific. Image is vague. Evidence can be measured. Image needs to be maintained. Evidence produces confidence. Image produces pressure. This does not mean you should never share achievements. There is nothing wrong with celebrating progress. There is nothing wrong with telling people good news. Human beings are social. Accomplishment can be enjoyed with others. The problem begins when being seen becomes more important than becoming. You can tell the difference by what happens when nobody is watching. If your effort collapses without recognition, the work may be too connected to image. If you can continue quietly, you are building something deeper. There is also a practical advantage to evidence-first living. It improves decision-making. When you are not trying to protect an image, you can admit when something is not working. Suppose you tell everyone that a certain plan is going to change your life. Now your ego becomes attached to being right. If the plan begins failing, you may keep pushing simply because changing direction would feel embarrassing. But if the plan is private, you can evaluate it like an experiment. What is working? What is not? What did I misunderstand? What can I improve? Should I continue? Should I adjust? Should I stop? There is no audience to disappoint, so you can become more accurate. Accuracy is underrated because it is not glamorous. But accurate people often win over time. They are willing to look ordinary while learning. They are willing to be beginners. They are willing to change methods. They are willing to admit mistakes. They are willing to progress slowly. They do not need every month to look impressive. They need the direction to be correct. That is how you build something durable. If you are rebuilding your life, choose one area where you want evidence. Not a story. Not an image. Evidence. Perhaps it is your health. For the next month, your evidence might be 12 walks, 8 strength sessions, a consistent bedtime, or medical appointments you have been postponing. Perhaps it is money. Your evidence might be a written budget, reduced debt, an emergency fund contribution, or a clear record of spending. Perhaps it is work. Your evidence might be 20 focused hours, learning a useful skill, a completed project, a portfolio, a certification, or a conversation with someone in the field. Perhaps it is your mind. Your evidence might be fewer arguments, less reactive messaging, a daily reading practice, journaling, therapy, or protected time away from noise. Do not underestimate boring evidence. Boring evidence becomes an extraordinary life when repeated long enough. There is a reason people are often surprised by someone's success. They saw the result. They did not see the accumulation. They saw the new job. They did not see the months of learning. They saw the weight loss. They did not see the ordinary meals. They saw the business. They did not see the failed experiments. They saw the confidence. They did not see the private decisions that built it. They saw the person after the evidence became visible. That is why your next chapter can look sudden to other people, even when it was not sudden at all. Your responsibility is not to make the process visible. Your responsibility is to make the process real. Chapter 6. Learn to work through the boring middle. Beginnings are easy to love. They are full of possibility. You buy the notebook. You make the plan. You clear the desk. You choose the date. You imagine the future. Your energy rises because everything still feels open. Endings are easy to love too. The result is visible. The weight is lost. The debt is reduced. The course is finished. The project is launched. The room is renovated. The savings account has grown. The new routine has become natural. There is proof that the effort mattered. The difficult part is the middle. The middle is where most quiet goals die. There is no announcement left to enjoy, and no result yet to celebrate. There is simply repetition. This is where maturity becomes useful. You have lived long enough to know that almost everything worthwhile contains a boring middle. Relationships contain ordinary days. Careers contain repetitive work. Health contains routine. Financial stability contains unexciting decisions. Learning contains confusion. Building contains delays. Writing contains revision. Recovery contains setbacks. Growth contains long periods where nothing feels dramatic. The ability to remain engaged during that period is one of the most valuable abilities you can develop. Most people think they need more motivation. Often they need more tolerance for boredom. Motivation is emotional energy. Boredom tolerance is structural strength. Motivation says, I feel like doing this. Structure says, this is what I do. That difference determines whether a goal survives. Working in silence makes the boring middle more visible, because there is less social excitement around the process. Nobody is asking how it is going. Nobody is applauding. Nobody is impressed by your third week of doing the same simple thing. Good. This is where the work becomes yours. The most stable habits are often built after the excitement disappears. You begin learning the difference between desire and commitment. Desire wants the outcome. Commitment accepts the process. Anyone can want to be healthier. Fewer people want to organize meals, go to appointments, sleep on time, move their body consistently, and repeat those behaviors after the novelty ends. Anyone can want financial security. Fewer people want to review statements, reduce unnecessary spending, delay purchases, learn basic financial concepts, and continue when progress feels slow. Anyone can want a better career. Fewer people want to spend evenings developing skills when they are tired, complete beginner-level exercises, tolerate rejection, and start from a lower position than their ego prefers. Anyone can want a different life. The question is whether you can live the days that create it. This is why your plan should not depend on inspiration. Inspiration is welcome. It is not reliable. Your system must still function when inspiration is absent. A good system answers 3 questions. What is the smallest meaningful action? When will I do it? What usually stops me? Suppose you want to write. The smallest meaningful action might be 500 words. You decide to do it from 7 to 8 in the morning. What usually stops you? Your phone, email, fatigue, household interruptions, perfectionism. Now you can design around the problem. The phone stays in another room. Email waits. The session begins before other tasks. You allow imperfect writing. You have moved from motivation to structure. Suppose you want to improve your health. The smallest meaningful action might be a 30-minute walk. When will you do it? After dinner. What stops you? Weather, tiredness, forgetting, staying on the couch. So you prepare shoes near the door, choose an indoor alternative, set a reminder, and decide in advance that 10 minutes still counts on low-energy days. This may sound unimpressive. That is exactly the point. Impressive systems are often too complicated to survive. Simple systems look ordinary, but create extraordinary consistency. The boring middle also requires a different relationship with progress. If you expect visible improvement every day, you will become discouraged. Progress often arrives unevenly. You can work for weeks with little visible change, then suddenly notice a difference. Your skill improves slowly, then a difficult task becomes easier. Your savings grow quietly, then one day the number feels meaningful. Your body changes gradually, then clothes fit differently. Your confidence develops invisibly, then you handle a situation that once would have overwhelmed you. This delayed feedback makes quiet work difficult. You have to trust the process before the result becomes obvious. But trust should not mean blindness. You still review. You still measure. You still adjust. The goal is not to repeat an ineffective method forever and call it discipline. The goal is to stay consistent with the objective while remaining flexible with the method. This distinction is crucial. Stubbornness says, I will keep doing the same thing even if it is not working. Discipline says, I will keep pursuing the goal and improve how I pursue it. Reviewing your system does not mean you failed. It means you are paying attention. Perhaps the schedule is unrealistic. Change it. Perhaps the goal is too large. Reduce the daily requirement. Perhaps you need professional guidance. Get it. Perhaps your environment keeps pulling you away. Change the environment. Perhaps the project no longer matters. Be honest. Silence helps because it gives you freedom to revise without explaining yourself. You do not have to announce version 2. You just improve the process. The boring middle also exposes emotional habits. You may discover that you start seeking distraction every time work becomes difficult. You check messages. You eat. You browse. You start another project. You reorganize instead of executing. You research endlessly. You tell yourself you need a better plan. These behaviors are often not about productivity, they are about discomfort. The work has reached the point where fantasy becomes reality. Fantasy is clean. Reality is messy. In fantasy, you are talented. In reality, you are a beginner. In fantasy, success is exciting. In reality, success may require 200 ordinary days. In fantasy, you feel confident. In reality, you learn while uncertain. This is the place where people either develop or escape. If you can remain, something changes. You stop expecting the work to entertain you. You stop interpreting boredom as a sign that the goal is wrong. You stop needing emotional intensity. You become quieter internally. You do the task. Then you do it again. There is tremendous power in becoming a person who can continue without drama. After 40, this ability becomes even more valuable because your life may already contain enough drama. You do not need your goals to create more. You need them to create structure. Your next chapter should not be built on constant emotional highs. It should be built on ordinary days that point in the right direction. That is what most transformation actually looks like. Not a breakthrough, a pattern. Chapter 7. Stop letting other people's timelines define yours. One of the fastest ways to destroy quiet progress is to compare it with someone else's visible result. You begin building something. Then you look sideways. Someone younger is further ahead. Someone older seems to have more. Someone started later and moved faster. Someone has a bigger audience. Someone earns more. Someone looks healthier. Someone appears happier. Someone changed careers successfully. Someone retired early. Someone bought the house. Someone moved abroad. Someone built the business. Someone seems to have figured out the part of life that still confuses you. Comparison creates urgency. Not useful urgency. Emotional urgency. It whispers, "You are late." Then you begin rushing. Rushing makes you vulnerable to bad decisions. You choose shortcuts. You overspend. You take unnecessary risks. You copy strategies that do not fit your circumstances. You quit a stable plan because someone else's result looks faster. You feel embarrassed by being a beginner. You try to skip steps. You expose your goals to people because you want reassurance that you are still doing well. All of this comes from forgetting one fact. You are not living on a shared timeline. This sounds simple, but very few people truly accept it. The world constantly shows you milestones without context. You see the achievement, not the debt. You see the promotion, not the years of compromise. You see the business, not the family money behind it. You see the body, not the schedule. You see the marriage, not the private reality. You see the retirement, not the decades of saving. You see the confidence, not the failures that produced it. Comparison removes context and then punishes you for being different. At 40, 50, 60 or beyond, comparison can become particularly cruel because you may start calculating what you should have done by now. You should have saved more. You should have traveled more. You should have chosen differently. You should have taken better care of your body. You should have left earlier. You should have stayed longer. You should have started the business. You should have finished the degree. You should have known what you know now. That last one is impossible. You cannot demand that your younger self possess the knowledge your older self earned through experience. Regret can teach. It should not be allowed to become a permanent identity. The question is not whether you are late according to an imaginary schedule. The question is, what you can build from where you actually are? That is a more useful question because it contains action. You cannot change 20 years ago. You can change Tuesday afternoon. You cannot redesign every financial decision you made. You can decide what happens with the next amount of money. You cannot undo years of neglecting your body. You can schedule the appointment. You can walk today. You can sleep earlier tonight. You cannot recover every lost opportunity. You can become more alert to the next one. Your next chapter begins exactly where you are, not where you wish you had started. This is one reason privacy matters. The more public your goals become, the more comparison enters the process. People ask how quickly you are progressing. They compare your method with someone else's. They send examples. They ask when you will finish. They measure your visible result. Even supportive people can unintentionally make you feel as though your progress is being evaluated. When you work quietly, you can choose a pace that fits reality. You can move slower if your responsibilities require it. You can move faster when conditions allow. You can rest without explaining. You can adjust without embarrassment. You can build according to your capacity, not according to someone else's expectations. This does not mean moving slowly forever. It means moving intelligently. There are seasons where intensity is appropriate. There are seasons where maintenance is enough. There are seasons where family responsibilities consume more time. There are seasons where health requires attention. There are seasons where health requires attention. There are seasons where health requires attention. A mature life contains changing seasons. The idea that you should make maximum progress in every area at all times is unrealistic. You cannot optimize everything simultaneously. You may need to focus. Perhaps this year is about financial repair. Perhaps it is about health. Perhaps it is about rebuilding after a divorce. Perhaps it is about caring for a parent. Perhaps it is about learning. Perhaps it is about simplifying. Perhaps it is about preparing for retirement. Perhaps it is about beginning again professionally. The chapter does not need to look impressive from the outside. It needs to be appropriate for your life. There is another trap inside timelines, the belief that starting later reduces the value of starting. It does not. If you begin strength training at 50, the years before 50 do not make today's training meaningless. If you start saving more carefully at 45, the money you failed to save earlier does not make today's savings worthless. If you learn a language at 60, you are still learning. If you begin writing at 70, you are still writing. If you repair a relationship after years of distance, the repair still matters. If you build a business at 50, it is still a business. The calendar does not cancel effort. Of course, reality matters. Age changes certain options. Health changes certain options. Financial obligations change certain options. Time is not unlimited. That is precisely why comparison is such a waste. You need your attention for the options that remain. A person can spend 5 years mourning the 10 years they wasted. Now 15 years are gone. That is the danger of regret without action. The better use of regret is conversion. Convert regret into instruction. I wish I had saved earlier becomes, I automate savings now. I wish I had protected my health becomes, I stop postponing appointments. I wish I had learned sooner becomes, I study consistently now. I wish I had stopped explaining myself becomes, I communicate clearly and move on. I wish I had built something for myself becomes, I begin. Regret becomes valuable when it changes behavior. Otherwise, it is just another form of self-occupation. Your timeline should be private enough that you can respect your own pace, but structured enough that you do not use patience as an excuse. This balance matters. Do not rush because someone else is ahead. Do not drift because you have decided that time does not matter. Time matters. That is why you should stop wasting it on comparison. Your job is not to catch up with everybody. Your job is to stop abandoning yourself. Chapter 8. Create a life that does not require constant explanation. A complicated life creates complicated explanations. You are late because you overcommitted. You are stressed because you said yes too many times. You have no time because you gave your attention to things you do not value. You are financially pressured because your spending is trying to satisfy an image. You are emotionally exhausted because too many people have access to you. You are distracted because every notification is allowed to become your priority. Then you spend the rest of your time explaining the consequences. There is another way. Simplify the structure. A quieter life is often not created by adding a perfect routine. It is created by removing unnecessary commitments. This is one of the most overlooked parts of rebuilding. People think the new chapter requires more. More goals, more habits, more tools, more apps, more books, more planning, more motivation. Sometimes it requires less, fewer obligations, fewer impulsive purchases, fewer conversations that go nowhere, fewer people with unlimited access, fewer projects, fewer promises, fewer distractions, fewer explanations. When there is less noise, your important work becomes easier to hear. This does not mean you should reduce your life to work and isolation. A meaningful life includes relationships, enjoyment, rest, contribution, curiosity, and ordinary pleasure. The point is not minimalism as a performance. The point is alignment. Your calendar should reveal what matters to you. Your spending should reveal what matters to you. Your attention should reveal what matters to you. If those three things contradict your stated priorities, the problem is not a lack of clarity. The problem is a lack of alignment. You say health matters, but the calendar contains no time for it. You say family matters, but the phone receives more undivided attention. You say financial security matters, but spending follows every emotion. You say your project matters, but your best hours go to low-value tasks. You say you want a quieter life, but you remain available to every request. A private rebuilding period is a good time to bring these things together. Start with your calendar. Where does your time actually go? Not where you think it goes. Where does it go? Most people have never looked honestly. Time leaks are easy to underestimate because they happen in small pieces. 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. A phone check that becomes 45 minutes. A conversation you did not want to have. A meeting that did not need you. A favor you agreed to out of guilt. An errand created by poor planning. An evening lost to passive scrolling. A weekend consumed by obligations you accepted automatically. None of these moments seems large. Together, they become your life. The same is true of money. A new chapter becomes easier when your financial life is less performative. Many people spend to communicate something. Success, generosity, taste, status, youth, belonging, control. They buy not only the object but also the story the object tells. The problem is that stories can become expensive. Quiet financial strength often looks unimpressive. It looks like saying no. It looks like repairing instead of replacing. It looks like choosing a less expensive option. It looks like automatically saving before spending. It looks like learning what you actually pay in fees, interest, subscriptions, and convenience. It looks like not upgrading simply because other people did. It looks like having money nobody knows about because it is not being used to signal anything. That kind of financial privacy can create extraordinary freedom. Again, this is not financial advice, and every person's situation is different. But the principle is useful. Money that is not required to maintain an image can often serve your real life more effectively. Now look at access. Who can interrupt you? Who expects immediate replies? Who can turn a small issue into your entire afternoon? Who regularly brings problems but never accepts solutions? Who treats your availability as an obligation? Who makes you feel guilty for focusing on yourself? This is uncomfortable because the answer may include people you love. The solution is not necessarily cutting them off. Often, it is changing access. You respond later. You limit certain conversations. You stop volunteering for every role. You say, "I cannot do that today." And you create times when you are not reachable. You stop making yourself the emergency department for every inconvenience in someone else's life. The more aligned your life becomes, the less explanation you need. You wake up and follow the routine. You spend according to your priorities. You work on what matters. You communicate where necessary. You rest without guilt. You protect time. You keep some things private. You stop creating unnecessary problems that later require unnecessary speeches. This is a quieter form of success. It may not look dramatic online. It may not impress people at a dinner table, but it feels different from the inside. Your mind becomes less fragmented. You stop carrying so many unfinished obligations. You begin trusting your own schedule. You have more room to think. This space is essential if you are building something new. Creativity requires space. Learning requires space. Recovery requires space. Good decisions require space. You cannot hear your own judgment when your life is constantly reacting. A simpler structure creates the possibility of intentional action. There is also a social benefit. When your life becomes more aligned, you become less resentful. Many people resent others for demands they keep agreeing to. They say yes, then become angry. They help, then complain. They attend, then feel trapped. They answer, then resent being contacted. They explain, then feel exhausted by explaining. The solution is not blaming everyone for asking. The solution is becoming more honest about your limits. A clear no creates less resentment than a dishonest yes. A protected hour creates less resentment than constantly being interrupted. A realistic commitment creates less resentment than overpromising. This is how you build a life that does not require constant defense. You design it in a way you can actually live. Not a fantasy schedule. Not an image. A structure. Your next chapter should support the person you are trying to become. If the structure of your life keeps defeating your goals, do not keep blaming your motivation. Change the structure.